All right. Okay, so we'll jump into the agenda and take a look first at the vision and mission statement. I know I took a look at these. I had like one little note in the bottom, but if you guys just, stop for a moment and see, does anyone see anything here that stands out that we would want to look at in terms of modifying our vision and mission statement? The only thing that I noted here and in the guiding principles when I took a look at it was perhaps the use of the word child might move to a word more like student to be inclusive of our adolescents who may not wish to be called child necessarily. I've already got a going on 9-year-old who maybe doesn't want to be called a child. I'm not quite ready for that, but
my only question would be, is this intended for current MPA, including the expansion?
Right. So I think that I think is our goal, and it brings up kind of a foundational question, right? Our charter runs all the way primary to 8th grade as it stands. I think as I was looking at this, right, I have the assumption that I was like, oh, like we would continue, right? The board would cover both campuses. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone like, oh no, we need to somehow recruit more board members for another board.
I don't think we can legally. I don't think legally. I don't think legally we can do that because our bylaws say one for over the charter and all that other stuff.
That's what I thought. Like our charter, our bylaws, everything says the board covers everything through 8th grade. So I think we can start with the assumption of the vision and the mission statement likely, unless we look at this and think, no, it's really two different things. That didn't stand out to me, but I wanted to offer up and ask, like, are we all aligned that the vision and the mission statement would be the same and it would cover both campuses? So if anyone thinks no, let's throw it out there and talk about it. Again,
Christina,
it makes sense. And I like the use of student versus child. Yeah. And I think even that applies to our current elementary campus. We could
right, yeah. Up rail, they start to get a little. Child. And Mr. Todd?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think that's the only thing I see. I think your suggestion is excellent, and I agree with that change.
Okay, I'm going to just note it down. Unless anyone disagrees, we would take child and update that to student. And is there anything else that anyone sees standing out that might be different when we're adding adolescents in here? I think we did such a great job crafting this in the first place, and the mission statement goes back so far that we were already there. Mm-hmm. Okay. This one is a little bit meatier, right? We got lots of words here. So if this was a place, to reflect on afterwards, I think the same thing. We have the word child in a few places. I think updating that as well to student would fit for everywhere that I found the word child on here. But is there anything at a glance, at least, that we would look at and say, ooh, this doesn't apply, right? There's maybe dramatic difference. Do we need different guiding principles completely for a middle school, or do these apply at the middle school? Do we think they apply at the middle school level? And is there any adaptations we would need to do aside from child? Oh, and I had just some basic grammar things I wanted to clean up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm wondering why it's dotted under collaborate together, and I think that's redundant.
Yes, exactly. Right. Right. So in this case, I'm like, if we make the change from child to student, and then if I can have a little license to clean up some minor grammatical errors, is there any other changes that stand out? And we won't spend all of our time here because you guys might want to actually stop and really look at these. So I would say we can, if there's anything that stands out, let's catch it now. If not, we wouldn't finalize these until the April board meeting anyways. So you'd have time to think on it.
I think these are all applicable. I think as we move forward, we may find we want to add some, that are more applicable, but I don't feel qualified to offer any additions at the moment.
Right.
I just know that I think it's a good place to start. I'll put it that way.
What I like about the guiding principles are when we're planning in the middle school realm, say we're maybe in the future we're working in a committee or we bring parents on board. This is an excellent guide to go back to, because a lot of our previous conversations, like look at honor the individual child. So if we change that to student, the third bullet, we value each student's unique contribution to the community. We've spent a lot of time talking about what makes the middle school experience so much deeper in that area. I don't think we need to change the guiding principle. It's just our lens. Our lens gets deeper on maybe one under each kind of heading. And I think that would just help guide our focus as we plan along.
Right. So if we feel like these apply at the middle school level with some minor changes, I think to your point, Mr. Bryan, yes, you would take these and we would look at these and say like, hey, does this program that we're developing honor the individual student and those different guiding principles? And you would just apply these to that program development.
Right.
I personally think it looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
I found one spot that I'd be curious to add academics. Under champion a culture of excellence, the second bullet, we maintain high standards of integrity, honesty, and transparency. I wonder if adding academics would be beneficial.
Is it redundant with the first one? I think the first bullet under there was intended to capture, right, we're academically rigorous.
Maybe.
I think you can say two different things. Like the first one saying we provide this, but we also hold
high standards on it.
High standards. I know there was a lot of discussion around this when we first
that one
on like
it's like Jana, you went straight to this point where like, oh gosh, this one was a thing.
Well, I'm glad I know where to hit the nail on the head.
You were right. Straight to the point. Yes, yeah.
There was a lot of discussion around this one.
Yeah.
Days of discussion.
I'm throwing it out there. I'm not saying I say or believe that it needs it. It occurred to me as a thought.
No. Good.
Well, and maybe there's a question. I mean, we could look at tweaking those 2 bullet points, to make sure they don't end up being redundant. But also, I think as we go through learning more about what middle school would look like, plus. Right, if we can get through all of the fun that we're dealing with right now in general, this was our sort of first writing of the guiding principles. It would be well worth it to go back and in a future strategic retreat, look at these and make sure they're still applying the way we intended, or have Mr. Bryan, you and the staff, as you've been using them, found something we should look at holistically across the whole program. Hopefully we did a okay job the first time, but this was still the first time we wrote the guiding principles. So any other items that stand out from a middle school perspective? Jen, I jotted down the note there to kind of reflect on.
Do you mind scrolling it up so we can see the bottom?
That is all of the guiding principles. I just have here like my notes to remember. I've got some like.
Right, I just can't, I can't move my screen around. I don't know, I can't see create responsible world citizens and underneath.
Really? Oh.
No matter what size I put it at, I can't see that.
Is no one able to see below that?
I can.
I can see all of it.
Maybe it's just my screen.
I'm like,
size
you got an interesting Zoom thing maybe going on. Okay.
Sorry, and thank you.
Yeah.
I think what maybe Beth and I will, since her and I talk about our NCMPS partnership, especially our essential elements rubric, maybe there's just some language that's been sitting in front of us on some of those documents that we might just want to slide over. So we'll just double check, but this is a solid.
Okay. So there's nothing here that would be different because of middle school, but I think what I'm hearing, that would be a great way to go back into these with the with the rubric and see if there's a way to.
Right.
I think this was just a couple of board members in my front room trying to write what we had talked about for days on end and capture, so it'd be great to review it again later. Okay. Let's see. And then this was the bulk of kind of where we need to make sure that we get kind of aligned, and grateful, Mr. Brian, Todd, Beth, and Jenna are here because this came out of some of our conversations from before. So what we did to get here was we went back and looked at our parent data from the postcards from the future that we did a couple years ago. We took a look at the staff visioning tree, and other feedback around what middle school might look like and what was kind of important, and we talked through that with this group. And then Mr. Bryan also did some investigation with the upper L students and was able to get some great data that kind of told us what was important to them, right? So that gives us our three main sort of constituents and the different data, bringing that together to say, hey, so I looked across all of those and said, where was the greatest overlap, right? Where did everyone agree? Because that's kind of, to me, sort of the sweet spot of everyone, right? It's the win-win, everyone's happy type of thing. And it was these three areas. So Lisa and I did a little bit of marketing language massaging around here, right? To kind of try and capture, who are we, right? That's our goal. Who are we as a middle school? So a modern Montessori program, right? That speaks kind of to parents, again, trying to put this sort of in, our target audience, parents, either at the primary, right? They're looking for a school, or maybe if they're looking for a middle school for a 6th or 7th grader. So a modern Montessori program grounded in a, again, rigorous academic program, right? That's the baseline, right? Like that. That's the assumption, right? We're going to obviously have a rigorous academic program, and then opportunities to explore. And then we were starting to talk about these sort of elective options, right? Where might we emphasize the program? And that's where these three areas came out of the data in terms of what was important to parents, kids, and staff. So the science and technology as sort of an emphasis, right? We would obviously have, basic, right? What you got to have, right? Baseline for middle school science, that's not negotiable. But if we were to place some strong emphasis into science, that came out in every piece of, every area of data. And technology, right? So some more advanced life and physical sciences. I heard something about, right, having fire. Is that right, Mr. Todd? Like we're gonna have some flame, some open flame, some chemistry going on, right?
Yes.
Right.
We need to make sure the building is up to code for that.
Right, which is where that came in, because it matters for our building design. But really going a little bit deeper, right? Our upper L kids and our, I think staff and parents, all this came up pretty high on the list of wanting to go deeper into science. And then the technology piece. So some examples here, right? Computer coding, robotics, some, technology, things like this. This isn't necessarily just making sure we've got computers for folks, right? It's really going a little bit more deep into the technology piece. Any questions on the first one? And then let's see if we're aligned on knowing what this means.
Hey, Christina, I would suggest at the top blue line, the modern Montessori program, use the word program twice. So it might be academic work or something, academic something besides program. That's
work or curriculum or something. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Take out the word a and make program work.
And okay, we'll play with that. Also on that line, since we're thinking about it, we're looking for a good marketing word. If anyone's, just put this in the back of your head, something that kind of helps us to, right? Understand that our middle school is small, but small doesn't sound good, right? That's not what we mean. It's not like, it's just little, right? It's personal, and it's right. It's about a community. It is not that many
Individualized.
kids. It's individualized, maybe, right? So we need a word there that kind of conveys who we are, because we're probably looking at, I think we said like no more than 150, 120 kids would really be in the building. Where are we at? Lower, right? Like 120? Okay, you're on mute, so I'm reading your face there. Okay, all right. But really, we would probably, if I was thinking of a 10% reduction, like we'd have 50 kids coming in. That's for 2 years. That's probably, we're looking at 90 to 100 kids, given our current elementary program, right? So fairly small, right? Which is an area we need in our market as well.
So is intimate a bad word?
That one, yeah.
Let's see.
How about if you
Right.
put a small, I want to get rid of modern too, to add to that, because it makes me think we're going to revise the Montessori.
Mhm.
What if you put a dynamic, a small dynamic Montessori program? Use the word dynamic.
I'm going to jot down a lot of different words
Suggestion.
here, and okay.
Modern concerns me. Is that one of the words that comes for ads or for marketing?
It's, to me, more of like a parent marketing, right? Like, you're always, of course, going to adapt Montessori to
Right.
the current time and place, right? And that's always modern, honestly. Like, yeah, I'm thinking of how parents might read this, and that's where we'll have brainstorm all these ideas. I'll write them all down, and then how we market it and put something up on the website doesn't necessarily change how we develop the program, right?
Are we trying to convey, both the size and the interconnectedness of everybody? Are we trying to just say the size, or are we trying to describe community? Those are
Right. Two maybe related things. Lisa, any thoughts here? Because we've bounced this around so much.
I know, we've thought a lot about this. Sorry, I've got a lot going on above me too. So sorry for the background noise. It's that time of the night. We've talked a lot about this because, sorry, the word tailored keeps coming to my mind. Like, it is tailored, which is a Montessori word. You meet the child where they are. Their education is tailored to their needs. That's what makes us so unique. And so how do we convey that it appeals to prospective middle school parents?
And that your kiddo is not one of a whole lot of kids, right? Where they may get lost, if you will, in the shuffle, right? What is unique, and one of our differentiators really would be the small size, right, of the school that is very personal. If that's something someone's looking for, right? Like, don't want to go into this, shipped off to this kind of large middle school.
Yeah, look at the middle schools in this area that we would consider as a parent, what I consider, and I look around. They're all very similar. They're large. They have a lot of offerings. They're all very similar in that aspect. And so that is what sets us apart, is the tailored education from my perspective. So that's where I'm stuck on, but I've chewed on this a lot, and I can't come up with the perfect word. I'm still chewing.
I say, if anyone has any other ideas, I'll jot them down. If not, this might be one to, like, Lisa and I have chewed on this several times. Like, now we can pass it on, and you guys can also chew on it, and then you'll have an epiphany, like while you're walking the dog or something, and you'll email out a perfect word. That's what I'm hoping for here. So no pressure. Okay, well, let's take a look then. Science and technology. Is there any, let's start with kind of the broad stroke there of science and technology being an emphasis at the middle school level. Is there anyone who would disagree? We're not saying STEM, right? Like, that's not the big letters that would go on the website to say we're STEM, because that would be kind of the opposite, really, of our Montessori philosophy in a lot of ways. But we can say that we're emphasizing, right, sort of these deep dives into science and technology.
Or are the life and physical sciences, are those the mandated sciences for middle school? Is that why we're calling those out?
Right.
Specifically? Okay.
Right. But if we're focused on, right, so like, yes, there's probably mandated, but there's also probably, right, we can just make it a little cooler, a little more science-y than, right, every other middle school at that point,
Mhm.
if we want to emphasize this piece.
Yeah, I almost feel like if we added something additional to help families understand what that means. So what are the life sciences that we're focused on? What would we be working on in that curriculum?
Right.
And then what would we be working on in physical sciences?
Mr. Todd, I think I know you had some ideas here. Is there anything that you would help kind of make that real for folks?
Well, not in sound bites, but
Right.
so like this isn't going to help for marketing, at least not without talking about it more. But
Right.
Part of what we'll be doing is, I'm looking at the outdoor education in the practical life area. The outdoor education is also part of the life sciences, because there will certainly be some sort of greenhouse and perhaps also beekeeping, beyond beekeeping just for viewing, but also for honey making. So yes, that's practical life skills, but also what the students will be absolutely required to learn to be involved in those aspects of the school, is a deep dive into biology. So I know, like, to emphasize, that doesn't help with the sound bites, but
Right.
It helps though, because that paints a picture that I could turn into a soundbite a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
To say that it's, applied life sciences in an outdoor environment. Like, to me, my wheels are spinning of the kids being outside and digging in the plants and, using the honey from the bee colony. Those things have a picture and you can see your kids doing things.
Right. And think of it this way, in primary and in elementary school, one of the things we talk about all the time is that it's hands-on learning. Well, this is really hands-on learning about biology. You're not reading it in a textbook only. You're doing it.
So these are interdependent, or interdependent seems to be or interwoven.
Yeah, I said integrated. So in a lot of cases, especially some of the practical life stuff would be integrated, I think, with, say, in this example, biology, where you got biology along with maybe the honey making and the business aspect. I don't know, maybe we're selling honey, right? Like I would be shocked if we didn't end up with integrated offerings like that.
Yeah. And I like the idea of emphasizing the interdependence of it, Brittany, in particular, because it's not just we're doing both and that they're connected with each other, but they are in fact dependent upon each other.
So my question is, this document itself, what is its purpose? If it's for us internal, I feel like this is a solid outline, very nondescript, very detailed, right? Very just to the point. This is the big picture. And then every single one of these is going to be broken down to a ginormous description. So
yes. So the point here is to make sure the board is aligned and has an understanding of, I don't know, what does science and technology mean? And I think, that Mr. that was like perfect way to make it a little more alive for.
Right. The main question is just, does it have enough information to give us as an internal group a really good idea of what each of those really mean?
Hopefully after we get through this conversation. Yeah.
Well, and then let's not forget about the community, because I think before we as a board vote and say, yes, this is the direction we want to go, we're going to want community input and community buy-in.
Right.
And I don't think you know, and everybody here can feel free to disagree, but I don't think we can, you know, at this point say we understand our, you know, we've taken their input on sticky notes and postcards and all the other things that Christina loves and are so helpful in this whole process. But I still think we have to present something at some point that says, this is the package we think we are putting together, and we want people's comments on it.
Right, which that's the goal of this conversation, is make sure that we understand what this is, right? That then we can take this outline and build it out into something that would be more right external facing. So did not spend a whole lot of time trying to write it all up, right? Without like just Christina's ideas of what this is. The goal here, right, is to make sure that we have the conversation, we all understand. So I think we got a better understanding of the first bullet point under science and technology, right, of what that might look like. So I grabbed some words like applied hands-on learning in chemistry and biology, right, integrated, dependent, or interdependent, you know, options here as well. So
Hey, Christina,
yeah.
One concern that I have is that all of these things need a space. Not everything, it needs their own
Yes.
space, but
Right.
like fire, you know, you got to have a
Right.
space for that. And we are very, very limited. And if we promise
Right.
things,
We're not promising anything. We just need to understand what the bullet points are. Then we need to kind of prioritize what they are. And then we got to see about the impacts to things like building design and
right, not to
community
get too
buy-in.
like practical, but if we're
Right.
putting this out, when Jack said about
Right.
putting it out to for community input,
Right.
be very, you know, just
Right.
that we're ready for that. If
Right.
we're not going to be able to offer all of these things, you
Right.
know, year one, that sort of thing.
Right. That's the goal of here, is to figure out what these are and what the priority are so that we can move into those next steps, I think. Yeah.
And sorry,
Yep.
Christina, not to beat the horse too much, but you know, we do have the community meeting coming up next week too.
Right.
And you know, so to the extent that people have either seen the agenda or listening, you know, and have comments, you know, that'll be important too.
Right. So yes, so hopefully we can get to a good understanding of what these are, so we'll be better prepared to talk to them where we can and figure out how to get those things. Yeah.
Well, one thing, Beth, you know, in doing all of our homework, we've looked at other school websites and blah, blah, blah. The one that really hit me is the latest one that Beth found on the St. Vrain Community Montessori School. So basically what they did is they take an outline like this, which looks very like, say, Jeffco schools, right? And all they did is they spun it into these categories that fit under Montessori. So I'll just give you an example. I'm just on their one-pager website, cultivating meaningful occupations. And then it's got kind of 4 breakdowns of what that would be. Their next category is middle school mastery. What does that mean, say? And then their next one is the community microeconomy. And then the next one is they kind of went with an art studio occupation theme, you know, alternative agricultural occupation. So all the things that we've been saying in our conversations, and the things we narrowed down to, we got all, now we just need to say, okay, here's our starting document, here's our next document that really sounds like us. So like when Todd said greenhouse and bees, that in a sense just means life and physical sciences. So so what would be our way of saying the exact same thing here, but in our own flavor? And I say we steal from other places. You know, right.
Smarter, not
Not
harder.
reinvent a wheel.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, another thing is just practical life. They give a one-liner on it, piece curriculum, a one-liner. So they just taken solid blocks of what's kind of just ordinary stuff and really made them inspiring sounding and done it in their own way. So I say that's kind of how, if you take what Jack is saying, here parents, here's the basic building blocks, but here's what it means in Montessori language. And you show them the two different and they'll go, oh, you know.
Is this the one you're looking at?
That's the one right there.
Yeah. So this is what we're aiming for. Yes,
Right.
is something like this. I think it's about us figuring out that part where, you know, who are we and what does it mean to us in the space that we have. So I'll keep that and I'll send out the link for folks when I send out
Okay.
the notes as well, so you guys can see kind of what we're aiming to maybe get to.
Right.
The only really
Okay.
thing that I see missing from this entire thing that I've seen come across from talking about adolescent development, hearing from the students in their cards, is that social piece of their interconnected community. I don't know if this is necessarily the spot to mention that, but that's not really built in yet. And I know that that has come across many times as one of the most important things from the children in that age group, is that social development.
Would that be like civic or some kind of government, like student
I think
clubs?
it's the hanging out at lunch, chatting with each other
Okay.
piece. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
community
But
development.
building that into our flavor as well, and making that, because we know the value in that. So how do we speak to that value to recognize that that's being addressed?
Right. So I've taken down that note.
Actually,
as
Jenna,
well.
I thought you said it perfectly. I don't know exactly how you said it, but you know, like civic interconnectedness. I think that, you know, that there are
Pretty
words
good.
like that that make that, again, going back to what Brian said, speak to our Montessori parents
We might want to
in a way
consider the
that's
word.
different than, I'm sorry, Brittany, in a way that's different than saying hanging out and doing teenage stuff.
Right.
Maybe the word peer. Maybe the word peer is a good, some kind of, you know, they're treating each other as peer colleagues. Sometimes colleagues is too adult, but you know what I mean.
I think
So
we
kind
all
of
have that idea of what we're getting at. It's where to put it and exactly the flavor for us.
So isn't it part of the practical life?
It is.
That's my
must
thought, is where to
cooperate.
stick it.
But
They're
I think the
cooperating
words
to
are
create
important for our parents to
culinary.
recognize that, Todd. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're calling these elective options, but is it truly our
That's a good point.
curriculum? Over on the left, it says electives.
I was gonna bring that up too, Becky. Yeah, I think that's confusing because it's not our electives, it's what we do.
Right.
Right.
I think it might belong
It's
up in this
holistic.
box of things of what we do. So I think we've captured the idea, and I think if we try to wordsmith it with this many people on the call, we'll not get to any of the rest of it. So maybe Lisa and I can touch base. I think I understand what we're talking about, and then we can work it into grabbing some language as well, if that's fair. Or we can just flat out steal it maybe from like St. Brain or something like that. Would be even easier.
I like the idea of identifying building blocks. That's resonating. I think both from what we could present to the community, the staff, this group at large. And those are broader themes of who we are, if I'm interpreting this correctly. Basically what we've talked about, basically what's here, but how do we set those middle? I like that middle school mastery. You know, yes, I want my child to master middle school. Like if I'm thinking from a parent perspective, and maybe we can't completely plagiarize that, but something along those lines speaks to our academic rigor.
Word, you know,
without saying
pay homage to.
Yes. But the building block idea makes a lot more sense than perhaps like, here's our gigantic menu of things we offer, right? I think that would speak. I think it would translate better to a lot of families. See, we don't want to be like, we don't want it to come across as we have so many things that we don't do it well. We do everything well. And within all that we do well, we have a lot of things. So it's
Right, right.
all in how you present it.
So let's make sure we understand what all the bullet points mean. I think we talked through life and physical sciences, right? Chemistry and biology, and some ways that might look more real to us. From a technology perspective, something like computer coding or robotics, these are not, right? These are not necessarily the things. These are the things that were in the data. Is there anything from a technology perspective, as a board, we'd say, hey, these are the things that we would want to kind of try to emphasize if we're going to look at, emphasizing technology. Is there anything here we want to make sure is a part of that vision?
Can math and science go hand in hand somehow? I feel like the college preparatory, high school preparatory thoughts are still with a lot of parents, that they don't want it to be that their child's not ready for high school. And
Right.
I don't think that's, what's going to happen by any means, but I think parents need to understand that too. I don't know how to convey that.
Right.
But Becky, I think I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe what we should focus more on things like, I mean, I know math is part of everything. It's the language of science. I mean, that's going to be there. But I think, botany and agricultural engineering and maybe genetics and
I'm
things
on
like
video.
the things that feed that hands-on stuff that Todd was describing. I mean, I know we shouldn't pigeonhole them. I know technology is really important, but maybe we go the route of like environmental energy systems, sustainable energy. I'm not sure exactly, what the focus should be, but something more along those lines.
Like, so computer coding, robotics, sustainable energy type of, you would add something here?
You could even use the computer coding and the robotics in that vein. You know what I mean? Like you could just work it into the general theme.
If we're trying to leave it open, then I agree with what Beth is saying. It's more of a vision or what we want to be overall than just robotics or coding, which is a very nitty-gritty practical way of saying it. Not bad because parents want to see this, but if this isn't for parents, if this is just for us to kind of map out who we'll be, then maybe it's better to do something with broader.
Well, I think it's to inform, right, the program development that says, hey, yes, right, if we're saying we would be emphasizing science and technology, and we have a great marketing way to talk about how important that is to us, right? But what does it when Mr. Bryan and staff go and build something? Is technology these three things? Is it something else, right? Is it whatever way the wind blows that particular year, or do we have particular things we care about from a board perspective we'd want to focus in on?
Before I lose track of it, can I just go back to what Becky said? And this is really critical for me because, I may be the least Montessori person on the call. I think there are going to be some parents, and there certainly are going to be parents who aren't parents of current students, who will say the best Montessori program in the world, and I understand this is an artificial dichotomy, so nobody yell. But the best Montessori program in the world doesn't make any difference to me if my kid isn't 100% academically prepared to go to high school. And so, and again, I know it's a false dichotomy, but I just want to make sure that when we're putting it into the Montessori language, that we keep in mind those parents who are, who have that as a central concern, and maybe those who are slightly less rigorous in their Montessori approach.
And I think in the top, the rigorous academic program. So let's say, baseline is that your kids will be ready for high school. They will be more than ready for high school. That's kind of baseline who we are. And then we need, some good language that speaks to parents about that, kind of regardless of where they're at on the Montessori spectrum. Because when we have parents coming to us looking to choose a school, they may not have a clue yet what Montessori really means, and they want to know their kids are going to be ready to go to high school. So they're not even Montessori parents yet, most likely. So yes, I think that's baseline, right? Like non-negotiable.
If I may, I believe I am hearing that there is concern, maybe not in this group, but that in the way we message to everybody else, that we're not, these words don't focus enough on, oh yes, we say it's rigorous, but what's rigorous? And if I'm hearing Jack right, and if I may intersperse my own thought in here, I don't even see the word math on this page. And I know many parents are concerned that our student really has to have the math necessary for what? Moving on to high school, getting into the best colleges and so forth.
Right. So yeah, let's go back to the math one real quick, right? So I think the assumption here is you're going to have, right, the level of math you need, right? Like baseline again, academic rigor. It did not come up in the data necessarily that says like, are we a math school? And that's a question to the board. It's not on this list, and it's because it wasn't in the data. And is that something we'd want to say as a board? Like, do we add math here? Because we cannot be all things in terms of emphasis to all people necessarily. Yes, we're going to have a solid math program. Do we make that an area that we're doing deeper program development?
I think it's simple as this. Under science and technology, you got a third bullet says advanced mathematics available. And that covers a lot of ground. You know, Todd and I have brainstormed around this idea of we offer core, you know, Montessori math. And then we need to offer an advanced, which implies more than typical middle school.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is it, and is it reasonable for, from a Mr. Bryan and for teachers to say, like, we'll have advanced science, advanced technology, advanced math, advanced music, advanced art,
No,
and advanced practical life, right? Right. So that's where I'm like, from a board perspective, we've got to be able to narrow our focus, or from this group's perspective, on which are the things that are higher in priority that we spend our time, our energy, and our money to develop. I don't want to be like the mean one here, but I've been mean all day at work, so I'll just carry it over. Right? Like at the end of the day, where do we focus our time, energy, and money?
Christina, don't worry about it.
Right. I'm like, right. So where do we focus time, energy, and money? And if math is on the list, fantastic. If it's,
so if I might, the math to me is the easiest thing to develop fully. Not because I'm good at math, which I am, but because it's completely abstract, right? I don't need a 3D printer to make sure that our students can learn math.
Right.
You just need a teacher who's properly certified and qualified to teach secondary math.
Right. Which is still time, energy, and money there to make sure we always have that teacher, from a sustainable program. But I agree. Like if you guys tell me we can have math and science and technology, like fantastic. I want to make sure as a board, we're not saying we must have all of these things. And then you guys are like, y'all are crazy. So where do we focus?
From a standards perspective, we already have to teach life and physical sciences, but we don't have to teach the tech part. So.
Right.
Well, I feel like it goes together. We're not just teaching math by standards based. We're actually doing this with application in almost every area, as Beth pointed out, being that universal language. So even if we wrote advanced math and applications, that makes total sense of the truth of what we're building.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say?
Key one that parents are looking for, as Jack said. I think math is important.
Right. And so, so I've added it to the list, but I will make us come back at some point and have to say, okay, which ones of these, if we're going to have, priority order, we'll have to come back and say which ones are most important. So when it comes to some kind of constraint, we know where to focus our time, energy, and money. Jack, you're on mute.
I'm not sure that we have to do that right now. Wait until there's a constraint. Here's what we want to do, and then let Brian and his folks figure out how to make it happen. And if something can't fit, then they come back and say, here's the issues we're facing. How do you want to deal with it? But I'm not sure that we have to right now say, well, if we can't do everything, I want to get rid of advanced math. I'm not sure that's where we need to be at this point.
Okay, well, let's get through all of the bullet points so that we understand all the things that we're talking about, so we're aligned on those. Any other questions for science and technology? Do we feel like we have a good understanding what these are? The only question I would have from an advanced math, right? The thing did come out from Jeffco on that, like, what was it? The high school credit for math. That's something we could explore, right? Strategically from a board perspective, if we wanted to try and go that far, or is that something that we should not put on the table? So from a board perspective, right? That's something that came out that we'll be competing with in our market. Do we want to touch on that at all?
My opinion is that is your phase 2 kind of offering. We get our first and second year baseline groups through, and then say by year 3, by then we should have, year 3 to 5, somewhere in that range, right? That is something that then we can start offering some possible high school credit in more than one area.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of push that stuff into the future realm so we don't forget it.
Right.
But I just don't think out of the gate.
Let me add a note down here.
Right.
Right. And that's why I want to make sure we're aligned. Like, this is not at the moment intended to meet that, right? What we're looking at is something a little bit more flexible from a program development perspective.
Yeah, I think we really have to look at years 1 and 2.
Right.
And then from there, years 3 to 5, and then from there, the next 5 years. So it's kind of 3 phases in my mind as the program develops, and everything around each phase is a budget, targeted size, and then targeted offerings. And so, especially if you talk to parents and you bring them into the fold and say, here's where we're going as a program, their first kiddo may not get all the bells and whistles because the program's new, but maybe the younger kids in the family, they're like, oh, I see where the program's going.
Right. I had to yell at my kids not to yell. I love the irony of it. Okay, so are we all good on that piece in terms of, right, we know where we're starting and where we're not starting on the math front? Because that would be a strategic decision. Okay. When we look under arts and humanities, right, so performance arts here, right, you've got your sort of the band, orchestra, vocal or choir type things, right? Music programs there, maybe theater types of things. I think we know with the size of the student body we're talking about, a band and orchestra, despite being really high in priority on the parent information, is not likely to happen. So if there's any concern there, I mean, I think just the size of the school would limit that, although there was some brainstorming around still having some options available, like maybe quartets, right? Smaller group, smaller music ensembles. That would be kind of, I think, the vision at a very high level of what performance arts would mean. And is there any questions, comments, or concerns from the board on that one?
From my perspective, why I feel like that's still relevant and important, not just from parent data, but the space that we currently have, that's capitalizing
Really
on the
aligns,
asset that
yeah.
we have. We have a
Yeah.
beautiful performance space available. Now, will that get touched and chopped to smithereens to make room for the gas burners? It might, I don't know. But if it doesn't, that is for me, it's a cost benefit analysis. Like, if we have the space, let's capitalize on it. Let's have that offering, right? If we end up having to cut that space, then to make room for our science and math, but you know what I'm saying? I think that's kind of the discussion, and where I felt I was like, oh, an
Yeah.
ensemble, but then I thought, wow, we have that really cool performance hall though, you know, and that's
Right.
something that's probably would speak to a lot of parents.
Yeah, it lines with our existing space. It's kind of parity with our competitors, right? Every middle school's pretty much got some type of music program. So if we want to compete on that front, and it was really important to parents, I think we just want to make sure we know it's not going to be a full marching band in the middle school.
And let's remember that that space is really important to the homeschool community as well, and some of our future plans for
Right.
growth. So hopefully we can hold on to it. But I think there's opportunity, and if it works, it works. And if not, then we evaluate and see. I know we're excited about that space.
I would just say that I don't think in any conversations that space has ever been reduced to something that would not serve as a performance hall, or even if you had to add a classroom or something, it would still be a huge space.
Okay.
So from that perspective, let's utilize that, right, within our curriculum.
I think I'm hearing we're aligned on kind of the importance of this and the kind of vision of what it would be, right? Not a marching band, small groups, but we'd be leveraging that space for these types of.
Performance arts is not just musical performance arts, but this would also be where we were talking about acting, a play.
Yes, yeah. So to clarify, right? So it could be anything from music, instrumental or vocal, to theater. What was the other option that we had?
Well, and in Montessori, I mean, how many of the lower elementary classrooms used to do a play performance every semester? You know, now that we have this proper space, I see some of those things being brought back up and done again, especially as some of the stresses of the past year or two start to fade, hopefully. That's really important. That performance piece to Montessori is really valued.
Okay.
I'm also wondering, can I ask a question? In the arts and humanities, I feel like if we're gonna put advanced math and science, that maybe we should put advanced language arts, because that's reading and writing. Just seems like if we're gonna say for the math, that's also math and writing are big, huge, or language are big, huge pieces, base pieces in that curriculum.
Is that back to our core curriculum though, or is that more of sort of the electives that a child could sort of go more deeply into in some cases? Like is every kid going to do necessarily advanced math, or are some kids going to go, you know, deeper into advanced math?
Their advanced creative writing is there,
advanced, right?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I don't.
Is that what we're
disagree,
thinking?
Beth. I think if we're gonna call out, because that naturally aligns with Montessori. You know, we go where the child needs to be met, right?
Well, a lot of yeah.
But to call it out in this way makes sense to me as well. Advanced language arts.
Yeah, and maybe as Christine was saying earlier, maybe it's not advanced, but something that differentiates that they can go kind of a standard curriculum of their normal middle school.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to like put all the bullet points for all of the standard curriculum in here necessarily. We'll have a lot of bullet points and then we won't be able to read any of them. Yeah.
I think to what Jack pointed out earlier, and what Lisa said, is that we have the space, and I think we have the luxury of remaining flexible and allowing the program to develop and meet whatever kids might be in year 1, year 2, year 3. I don't think we necessarily have to say poetry or music or theater. I think the space is there, and those students can use that and make that space what they need while they're there. And so maybe it's more about that than trying to pinpoint. As long as we provide the space and the students the freedom to do that, it doesn't cost a lot of money or a lot of, budget wise. That's not something that we have to decide now.
And Brittany, I totally agree with that. And I'll combine that with what Beth said, because I think the broader we keep things, the more flexibility that gives the students going forward and stuff. On the other hand, wanting to make sure that this document that then becomes, you know, a bit of a marketing document later on also reflects all of the opportunities. So, you know, best thing of, you know, language arts, which could combine everything from a student newspaper to creative writing to, you know, merge in with the theater and stuff. You know, a broad heading like that to me kind of gives you, tells people that we're thinking about those areas without saying specifically what that means, because we don't want to, because we want the kids to be able to do that later.
So can I ask maybe a stupid question? Please?
There are no stupid.
There are no stupid, right, that's what we're supposed to respond with, right? Yeah.
Christina,
Yeah.
this document that we're perusing, is it intended to not have in it those core subjects that absolutely have to be taught? Like
Yeah,
basic math, basic reading, basic
right.
writing?
To me, that's all. I think that's all baseline. We can incorporate it into, right, whatever in document speaks to parents, but to give some guidance, right, when you're sitting down and saying, you know, are we trying to do everything? No. Which things are really important, right? Strategically from a board perspective that says, right, we want to play heavily in the science, technology, math space, right? We want to go advanced there. So, right, how we do language arts, right? If that's, are we a writing school? Are we a math school? Right, like it's that higher level question. So baseline, how we tackle language arts, I would expect that would come out of the program development for how you're going to do baseline academics for middle school. The board doesn't have a whole lot to say about that. We have to do those things.
I feel like we're in this bit of a conundrum. If the child is an advanced writer, we're going to follow that child and allow them to be advanced.
Right.
So clarifying that because that can happen in any subject.
Yep, every subject.
We're doing that with every child.
Right.
So clarifying the specific purpose for this document and speaking to that ability somewhere else, making sure that's clear. I think as long as that happens.
Right. That to me is part of this, right? That's our vision and mission, and that's our guiding principles. Those are already embedded in there when we speak to, you know, how we follow the child and how, you know, that's sort of that Montessori philosophy.
But this says to me more about if Brian, Beth, if everybody at the school needs to say, okay, I need to go carry this out, and there's a decision. Do I hire an advanced, you know, do I hire someone with a advanced math degree, or do I hire a performance art instructor over that? What do I do? And because who do we want to be in year 1, year 2, year 3? And so to this, like you said, it's going to be a little bit of a, you know, harsh, we got to make a decision about something that doesn't have to be now, but you know, I think that was the intent to say, okay, are we going to allocate more resources to science and technology year 1 and let the space maybe provide arts and humanities for that first year or so, and invest more in structural space for practical life, or use the outdoors instead and not use that? You know, those kind of things are more the overall than the nitty gritty of how that might look.
Right.
So that's changing how I look at this now. And I apologize, it's taking me a little bit. I was seeing this as marketing and what parents want to see in our curriculum and what our community is looking for. But it's really, where are we putting our dollars? Where are we putting our investment? Then the rest gets figured out later.
Right. So we might be able to do creative writing, but is that where we're saying as a board that we wish to spend our money? Like, that's not like, we're like, let's be a creative writing school, right?
Well,
like this, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Here's kind of the way I look at it, and this is why I wanted the advanced math in there, is when we hire, we have to hire an adolescent trained Montessorian, okay? They handle all the core type curriculums that we're all kicking around here. But if Mr. Todd's teaching upper across the way, we can figure out how to bring Mr. Todd over for an hour and offer advanced math. It automatically is already on the table. It's not something that we have to go hire for. So I also kind of want the low hanging fruit on here. I think Jack said the word, instead of elective options, it should be opportunities. So let's just get out of trying to compete with middle schools with electives. And so I think what Becky's saying is, now, once we kind of see, okay, what is the talent we have currently, and then what is the talent we need to hire? Does this list give us some guideposts? Is this kind of the flashlight in the dark of where we need to spend our time and energy? And it's looking pretty good. I mean, it also is assumed that we can plug in physical education, which isn't on here. So there's a bunch of core things that kind of come along with the middle school just because we already have the talent in our building. So.
And there are some of the things that are baseline, like we got to do PE and English and math and those sorts of things. So it's not called on here. What it does call it is we're not a athletics school, right? That didn't come out huge. We're not going to say like, man, we're going to offer all the athletic opportunities. We're going to build you an Olympian, like you're going down that path right now, right? Like that's definitely not who we're on. It's not on the list even to talk about unless somebody wants to add more to the list. So what came out of it was really, right, these emphasis on the things we've talked through so far. I think we're aligned on, right, performance art means small group type of ensemble work in music and theater. Visual arts, right, the art room and the ability to explore these visual arts came out in the data as well. I don't know if anyone has any particular things under this area that we'd say, gosh, we'd really want to be able to do this, right, specifically as a differentiator.
We have such a I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I stepped on. Sorry.
No, go, Lisa.
Oh, no. I was going to say, we have such a robust art program at our elementary level. I mean, the fact we have a kiln, that's unique to us. So I would hate to see us just stop that. You know what I mean? Right. I'd hate to see that, but I also, again, it's utilizing what assets we currently have.
Right. So we have one space currently, and it's not a large space, but if it's going to be a kitchen, then that takes up that space and we can't have an art space. You know what? I don't want to say the word can't. I'm saying,
well, if we say
have
that
to make
art,
some choices there.
Right. If art came out in the list and no one has any specific ideas or vision of what this looks like or means, great. Then I'd say we just leave it on there and let Mr. Bryan and the staff, right, think about how they could creatively use the space. They already started brainstorming ideas about how we might use the space we have to support whatever we can do in terms of middle school development. Okay. So some kind of art program would be important to our community. Foreign language, I think we all know this came up actually very strongly again in parent data, but it also came up in the upper L, the student data, I think as well. So offering a foreign language program of some sort. Is there any strong vision of what this might look like?
Financially, I can't imagine us supporting more than one language.
So Mr. Bryan shared with us some online options that are they offered through CDE? I can't remember, Brian, but I thought they looked really good.
Yeah.
And you're not limited. It can be any language.
Right. Since there's actually some benefits of the pandemic, and that is there's a lot of online opportunities now, especially in the area of foreign language. So there's a couple different ways to look at this. We could contract service. That's one. And that was kind of what Todd's referring to. There's a grant through the state of Colorado run by one of the BOCES that can kind of offer individualized classes depending, so that small schools such as ourselves don't have to have degreed people in biology or foreign language, these kinds of things. And so there's some opportunities there. Another opportunity is to just add foreign language as a fourth specials for the main building to free up 3 other, plus the fourth language person specials for the middle schools. There's a lot of different ways. And so this is what Jack's talking about. If you can give us a guideline,
Right.
then I can take it back to the staff and we can piece together the talent pool and give you a cost analysis with it.
So I think that's the question here. Is there any strong vision around what this might look like? So the data came back, right? There was strong emphasis on Spanish as the language, right? So that would be maybe some guidelines, like, would we want to focus in on one language? Maybe the opportunity for multiple languages. Is it a foreign language program that might stretch from primary through to middle school or just middle school? These are maybe the only kind of guidelines I think we'd want to focus on from a vision perspective. Anyone have any strong opinions on this one?
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I do. If we're going to do it, there's an awful lot of data that shows that when kids learn really young,
Right.
they learn
That's my only strong opinion too. Yeah.
Easily, and then not only can they learn that second language, but it expands their minds. They can learn multiple languages.
Right.
Yeah.
But young is prior to the age of 7.
Yeah. I was going to say, if we're going to offer it, let's offer it.
So we'd want to see it from, would it be fair if I clarify this a little bit with primary through, middle school?
I would love it. I don't know that we can do it, but I would love it.
Right. That'd be our druthers, unless you come back and tell us we're crazy, right? And how and why. Okay. So I'll just take
asked for a really long time.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we get into whatever constraints, right? Do we care more about this or do we care more about that? And that's when we'll have to make decisions.
Well, and then financial constraints in the middle of this.
Right.
It doesn't mean our timing is impeccable.
What money?
Okay, so primary language or foreign language from beginning in primary through middle school. Does anyone have strong opinions on the language or how that is implemented in terms of focus, or if we let Mr. Bryan and staff think on it and what they could offer back in terms of ideas? Okay.
I would just throw out Latin is always an incredible language if you're focusing on sciences and building that as a key component, and there's so many things that Latin can be the backbone of when they get into other languages. So
right.
I would toss it out there. I don't know
Okay.
how realistic that would be, but
all right.
That could thread throughout. In addition to Spanish could be very practical. So
right.
I mean, I think, but I would just drop a vote for Latin.
Okay. So as we go into thinking about those things, some things we could think about there, Mr. Bryan, with the staff in terms of what would be possible in terms of languages offered. I could see Spanish, Latin. There's probably other reasons we might suggest, some other specific types of languages, but we'll leave that for deeper dives later. All right. The practical life piece. So a lot of things came up under this area in terms of areas, right, we might focus on. So culinary, right, whether that's farm to table kinds of things, whether that is, but having a space, right, to do culinary. Business included things like finance, budgeting, entrepreneurship types of topics, right, kind of rolled up under this business category, if you will. Occupations and maker spaces, I think we've talked about a lot of those kind of already in detail, but some of those very practical hands-on items. Outdoor education, we've talked about a lot. And then community service came up in the data quite a bit, but then also, Mr. Bryan, we talked about like the community expertise, right? Kind of bringing somebody in, maybe like a Mr. Todd, right, for advanced math, but having other types of community expertise where you might bring someone in for a short-term engagement to teach, things that people know, right. And that could be something that would be, right, that would probably differ, from year to year in terms of what community expertise is available and what the school wants to do. So I don't know if there's any strong opinions on what that might look like, but I think that one was left at a very high level for flexibility. Any questions on what's in practical life or what these bullet points mean? And is there any specific kind of vision of what these might look like that would help provide guidance on how we might, I think we know it's not necessarily a farm school, but the practical life component, a vision of what that would look like.
When Christina, when you kind of recapped this to me, particularly like, oh, these are some options. To me, I got really excited because I was like, that's everything you just described is practical life. Practical life is the cornerstone of Montessori. So to me, this wasn't, oh, we've got to find. It was like, this is very natural. This is who we are.
This is kind of fundamentally probably who we are. Yeah.
And these are more things that are applicable to the adolescent plane of development.
Right.
So to me, this wasn't, and now if we get to logistics, yes, this may be reaching for the sky, but from a curriculum program development, this was very obvious when you described it all to me. So I don't know if I may just be speaking for myself, but I think that's important. I think it's a cornerstone of the Montessori curriculum. It's practical life. And I think there are easy ways to do this.
And I think it calls out we're not necessarily a farm school, but our practical life component is probably that cornerstone like you're talking about, but it's through these types of activities that we've talked about what that might look like, not necessarily what folks might be comparing us to in terms of like compass.
But I think we do need to have a little bit of, I think this is the one category because there is so much of this that business occupations, that could be different every year. It doesn't need a huge space. It doesn't need different staffing necessarily. Outdoor education, we've already got great property that can be different all the time, but things like maker spaces and culinary or occupations, those seem to me like they need a decision about a priority, a direction, because are we going to buy saws and stuff and electrical equipment? Are we going to buy fridges and whatever? I'm bringing it down, but I think that's the point, is for us to say which direction do we want to say so we can allocate the dollars to that.
Right. I think we had a decent understanding that culinary kind of focused on commercial grade kitchen. Did I get that one right? I don't have my notes handy. Right, but having a kitchen space that would be large enough to have a small group doing culinary things. So that would be a facility, impact there to have that space. And then was there any specific things we wanted to call out in the occupation or maker spaces, Mr. Todd or Beth or Jenna or Mr. Brian, on the things that were top of mind for that?
Well, wait, can we go back to the culinary? Because I think we had discussed it and it's certainly an option, but I'm not sure that as a whole, we've made the decision, and then maybe you weren't saying this. That's the way we're going to go. Because as you and Brittany have both pointed out, well, that makes a huge difference.
Right. So I think understanding what culinary means versus what occupation makerspaces means, and that's where the prioritization piece comes in, right? That's why it's critical to say, if we only have enough space for one of these two things, which one are we choosing? Which one's most important strategically to the board?
So can I talk about the culinary for a moment?
Yeah.
The culinary does not need to be large. It just needs to have the equipment in it that's up to code. It doesn't have to be a huge space. The space that's in there right now that's already kitchen is space enough. It just has to have a dishwasher that can go up to 140 degrees. It has to have 2 sinks. I mean, it has to have the stuff you have to meet code. It does not need to be big. In fact, our servery is twice as big as what I'm envisioning needs to be. Our current servery is a giant space that you have to walk across a lot of to do things in. No, I'm serious.
No, and that's really helpful, Todd. That's very helpful.
Couldn't we use that servery instead of making a kitchen in the new space? I mean, could we just utilize what's there?
No, not around our food service prep for the main building. Yeah, it gets really tricky. Yeah.
And I'm going to pipe in for homeschool. This is something that our community has really talked about a lot as long as I've been there. And we were thinking the idea around having 5 or so. And so that means 5 or so small prep spaces, making sure that the equipment has the plumbing to be built in if this isn't our top priority now, but available soon. When we're splitting our classes, 5 to 10 is how we split them. Not that we need 10 in any way, but having this ability really adds a lot of options for the homeschool environment and community as well. I would slightly disagree with Todd, honestly, that we need about the size of the servery for what our vision was. But that's not ginormous in any way, but it does need to be commercial grade. That would be preferable.
Are there rules against putting like kitchen equipment in a makerspace? Like, could part of the makerspace have, you know, a commercial grade stove, a food prep area kind of?
Yeah, it depends on what else is in that makerspace. Is the makerspace where we're sawing wood, then that's not going to work. But if the makerspace is, if it can be clean, I think the answer to your question, Beth, is possibly. It depends on what we're actually doing with that other space. Can it be combined? And I think that's really a legitimate way of thinking about it. There are some things here that I think more than one thing can happen in the space.
So if we bring it up just a little bit, right? So do we understand what we're kind of thinking of in terms of culinary? And then let's see if we understand what occupations and maker spaces are. And then depending on what those end up really being would determine whether they could be done in the same space or not. I don't think we're going to solve that tonight.
No.
Yeah, I almost feel like, Christina, if we jump down to occupations to get a better idea of what occupation our school could achieve.
Right. I know some of the data underneath this included things like woodworking, maybe community projects around building something like that. I think back to when I was a kid, and that was more like some of the hands-on shop type things that I really wish I had chosen to take, because now I can't change a light bulb. So yeah. Or some of the business things too, right? I think that was some of the other options that came up here in terms of a store type thing as well. You know.
So we have a space for that already. That's by the front door. So I don't think that knocks anything off this list. Thankfully, you know, I don't think it's an and/or a either or kind of situation.
Right.
But.
Any other things that might have fit under occupations or makerspace from our previous discussions, just to give a vision for the board members that weren't in those?
Just a couple things I wanted to clarify. Makerspace, again, is pretty low dollar. It just has to be a good room for it. I think the culinary is a high priority to discuss and put into the plan. It is a unique offering, and if you're going to do it, you have to do it now. The other thing that we chased around is adding any outdoor elements with our current funds. And after talking with John from DCS, there's just, we're not going to have any budget to put an outdoor building, say on the middle school campus as a shop. That's about a $500,000 perspective with all the plumbing and foundation work. And so whatever we decide to do, it's got to either be self-contained in the middle school itself and then maybe we take advantage of the outdoor education on the main campus. And if we really want to look at a quality grade greenhouse, it may have to go onto the main campus, not the middle school campus. So we chased a lot of ideas, and right now the money's so tight. I think we have to compartmentalize that. The middle school building as is, whatever we want's got to fit inside that space. And then outdoor education's kind of a separate conversation because of just location and cost. So
can I ask Beth and everybody a question about the culinary? Normally where I've seen that is that there is some kind of growing, there's an agricultural component, and then the culinary piece kind of flows from that. But if we don't have an agricultural piece, then does it make sense to have that culinary piece? Are we going to be, or would it make more sense to do like an occupational, a trade, maybe trade, like that kind of thing with the space instead? I just want to throw that out there to see what your thoughts are.
It still makes sense from the homeschool programming perspective.
To do culinary? I think culinary is essential. It's a community builder. Even if you did it only once a week, it is a community builder. When kids make the food together, it doesn't have to be that they grow the food to cook the food. The cooking in itself is an art and a learned art. And there's something to be said for having that as a contributor to the whole feeling in the community. If you go to some of these schools that have the culinary, all kids from little to big are eating together. It just builds a lot of good energy. Food binds people together. It's also an occupation to learn. I think it can stand by itself.
Thank you, Beth.
So it sounds like we have to select one, right? We have to choose either culinary or a shop. Is that kind of the choice that we're making?
And I think if we understand, right, again, what these things mean, and to Mr. Bryan's point earlier, right, there could be year one, year two, right? When funds become available, is this something that's important to us, or are there grants? I would imagine, since Jeffco's putting in Warren Tech campus nearby, right, they've done some work thinking ahead. I know I've got a friend who works within the community college system and trades, right? Practical life things along these sort of maker spaces are looking up as I think about, right, the kids coming into our schools now. Not that college isn't kind of the thing we're always thinking about, but trades, apprenticeships, there's a lot of money going into that at the community college level right now. So it might be areas that kids want to consider not having to invest $100,000 into college and have a good paying job coming out of school. So I just think there's some scenarios in the future where that becomes more important and more of a market differentiator that they could start to explore in middle school. Yeah.
Everything we've heard around middle school curriculum in Montessori is that there are primary occupations, and those are selected at the school level. And then the curriculum's kind of built around that. So instead of building the curriculum as, this way, they're building, this is our occupation. Now, how can we get math, science to play into this occupation? So I almost wonder if we need to be selecting our occupations. If culinary is one, because we know that that's important, what's our other occupation? And then those become the two most important things from the building's perspective.
And Brian, what you had mentioned before, instead of occupations, you kind of framed it as like projects, or which is, to me, is different. An occupation might be like Compass with the bike shop. Projects connotates to me more flexibility as the years go on to adapt with what the kids want to choose and invest their energy in. But I don't know, are they both part of, can you provide some kind of light onto that?
Well, I think maybe Todd can weigh in on this too. I mean, there's occupations, there is enterprises, and then there's programs. And seems like occupations is woven in very deeply, but they flex over the years. You know, it's like for 20 years, you're not going to have the same occupation. Things evolve. And the enterprise and the business more go hand in hand. They're all together. But I think, again, if we use what we have, your maker space starts with hand tools, you know, and I took a class from CU Science, and we just had like 3rd to 6th graders all using hand tools, and you can do that in any room. If we feel we want occupations to go into building bigger structures, more power tools, more space, see, that's part of the visioning process of expanding the occupation over time. So Todd could probably explain a little bit more.
Well, I'm actually going to backtrack first, which is the so you mentioned the bike shop, and I'd like to talk about that for a minute at another school. So one part of a Montessori adolescent program everywhere in the world that calls itself Montessori is there is in fact some sort of retail shop, some sort of store. It can be a service, like one of the local schools services bikes as opposed to selling them, or it can, you know, it can be a good that you're selling or a service that you're selling or a combination of that. But there is a store of some sort, and children work in that. Children, adolescents, our students work in that store, and they rotate in and out, different students for certain amounts of time. And yes, we should be, in answer to, I believe it was Becky's question, we should be deciding what our business is. And we're not exactly designing, we're not going to design the curriculum around the business, but we are going to integrate the curriculum into the business as much as it's possible. And that's not to say that, oh, if I can't think of a way of teaching how to, if I can't think of a way of integrating teaching plotting slope on a graph into our business, that doesn't mean we don't teach plotting slope on a graph. We still teach that when they take algebra. But whenever you can integrate your mathematics, whenever you can integrate your science into the business, you do. But the business actually is something that we almost have to start with. It's my opinion, we do have to start with it. We have to decide what we're doing for a business. To Brian's
I think
point, it doesn't mean that we can that business can never change or evolve. Of course it can and will. But there has to be some business that our students are involved in from day one.
So I think it's fair to ask then, from a strategic sort of vision perspective, from a board perspective, is there a particular business that we would say this is where we want to go, or do we say, hey, we've talked about all of these things, let's see what Mr. Brian and Mr. Todd and Beth and Jana come up with that makes sense, and we don't have any specific strategic direction we would push towards.
So we've batted around a bunch of ideas.
Right.
But I would also say, isn't it important to consider the students' interest? Like, wouldn't it be cool for this first group of 7th graders? They pioneer this, they are invested in this, they decide what the business is. I mean, they have parameters, freedom within limits, right? They have parameters. We could do this, we could do that with that.
Yes, as long as we don't have a particular thing that we'd say, gosh, right? Like,
right.
Compass is a farm school, that's what they do. Like, I haven't heard from this group that we say, gosh, we are a bike shop school and that's what we want to be. And it's like, no, maybe it's what the students want to do, or what.
Right. That seems more.
Right.
I don't know. I would find that really interesting and exciting. Right. And I think a 13 or 14-year-old might buy into that a bit more than being told, and you will get to run a spirit wear store or something, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like they've come up with this, if there's some buy-in there, and what a unique opportunity for this kind of pioneer group of kids that will come through. But I do think it's worthwhile to note too, as we do this building thing, the culinary piece, we keep coming back to. Jana's mentioned it's important to homeschool. Even if it's a smaller space, I think it's important to consider, because I think, and I know we don't want to get into swapping campuses, but that could be utilized not just by middle school. I think of all the times I ran up and down with a tray of gingerbread trying to bake in that one oven for the primary classroom, and that kind of stuff. I think practical life is just so important, and culinary is such a big part. So sorry, I'm rambling. It's been a long
And
day.
culinary could be part of the beginning entrepreneurial services
Right.
we can start with. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many, and the students, as they come up with their ideas about what they want to do for their beginning small business, it's going to be small. This group's not huge. We're, as guides, if they have the most lofty ideas, okay, but we still have to guide them towards something that is most likely feasible, and allowing them to have their stumbles as they learn that as well. So I think there's growth opportunity there, but it's not going to, be the top thing at the beginning. There's time.
So is it fair to leave it at this level, using our, stealing from St. Frayne theme here, right? The community microeconomy, where there would be, right? There's something here, and maybe it's student led. I'm not hearing anything strong opinions of what it needs to look like that defines who we are as a middle school. And I'm just trying to, in the interest of time for this evening, unless there's any strong opinion, we just keep it high level and see where the program develops.
I like that. And the other thing that, and Todd just mentioned it, but, and Brian has, the beauty here is I think that what Brian and Todd and Jana and Beth are going to be able to do is to take this overarching theme and figure out how, is there a way to have 2 + 2 = 6?
Right.
So that using Todd as, being able to help out with the middle school on certain things. And is there a way to do, cross-utilize things? And that's where I think that once they have this basic setup, we've already seen with COVID, give these guys a couple of weeks with a problem and they come up with amazing solutions.
Amazing, innovative solutions, right?
So,
yes.
Here's the stuff that's important. How can you figure out how to make this stuff work? And I tell you, they're going to come back with amazing things, and the stuff that they can't, they're going to say, okay, here's the problems we have. And then we focus on those. And I think where we are at right now is a great start for that. And I almost think that going much deeper
constrains the creativity of the staff.
As opposed to guides them.
Right. So that's where I am at as well. But I'm
Well,
Mr. Brian.
Let me ask Brian if it seems to me like there really needs to be. It seems to me pretty. Do you put a kitchen in or not? And then yes, you can have all the freedom or whatever. But it seems to me a little bit of a. Well, Brian, do we need to decide that? Do you feel we need to decide that or no?
Yes.
That's right.
I think there's 2 things. If we're going to take our time and kind of figure out and not rush in the next 4 days to figure out our occupations, I think a safe bet for the future is invest in the kitchen. The second is to invest in an outdoor space where the indoor classroom opens out to that patio to the south on there with wide open doors, so there can be some free air if we do want to saw or make messes. We just need to build a shell of a building that has built-in potential for whatever we decide. Maker spaces are flexible, science spaces are flexible, robotics are flexible. But if we decide we want a bike shop, that may not fit, you know, in our current landscape, but we could still do it. But if we really wanted every kid using a power tool, I think that's a little off our scope. So I really want to encourage the infrastructure to be built for flexibility for the future. So and I would say the kitchen is a good investment.
I've heard we need a kitchen. It's not a huge kitchen. We've got, right, some minor kind of requirements around what would be needed. But
right.
I mean, does anyone disagree that we heard we should invest in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Okay. We should talk about what maker spaces might look like around a business model, and then we should think about that for future development, most likely, especially if we're going to need to look at how to fund that, whether it's through future funding or bonds or grants of some sort.
And then I think the third thing is a greenhouse. If we really want to utilize our garden space in a capacity, then that's also some future thinking. So I think this is all another conversation where we can just focus tightly on that and kind of go from there.
I say, I feel like we've got enough to go into that next deeper level in terms of staying within what the board's sort of strategic vision is. Does anyone disagree given the conversation we've had? I've taken some notes. We can try to capture that into something nicer from a, not a bullet point list necessarily. We can try to maybe do that by the community meeting. Looking at you, Lisa, maybe we've got some marketing language. Yeah, maybe we'll see. It's a very rough week. So,
That's Monday.
but at least for probably, I think for the general meeting, we could potentially try to come back with something like that. But I think we have enough information to go back to our smaller sort of committee group and continue to dive more deeply. And okay, I'm seeing Mr. Brian, Mr. Todd, Jana, Beth. Okay, you guys feel like you've got enough information. Great. Okay, and all the board members feel like we've given enough strategic guidance. Okay.
Can I throw out just one more? We had talked about travel and some kind of overnights, kid-centered trips that we thought would be helpful in driving retention. Is that still something that we see as a priority? It might fall in under the curriculum and it's already planned, or is that something that we would want to add?
Great question.
I think it gets added to the occupation discussion. We already have that at the 6th grade. It's just been kind of redirected with COVID right now. But I think coming from expeditionary learning, yes, anything design-wise that we make, what is the experience off campus? So yeah.
So I'll capture a note around, I thought maybe it would fit into community service too, is where maybe I thought I was hearing it, but if we capture that note and see how to integrate that in, hearing that could be a differentiator strategically.
And just to add, that's just an app, just like expeditionary. That's what we do in Montessori. There should be going out. We've cut it all down, but there should be going out. There should be trips. It's just part of it.
Okay.
Practically, it gets harder.
Yeah.
Right. How to make it happen. Whew.
Right.
That's some innovative, thinking space. Good. Okay.
But you're right. Making sure that that's captured on here somehow so it doesn't get lost is important.
So I've captured some notes down below. I'll send out this version of it if we feel like we've come to kind of a consensus of like a rough sort of strategic vision of what this might start to look like. We've left some open spaces for the smaller group to do some creative thinking, and then we'll continue to kind of work back through as we go through next steps, I think. All right.
I appreciate that. Hey, Christina and Jack and Lisa, Monday nights are town hall. I'll start off with just kind of you know, where we're at in the landscape of schooling these days, and then we'll switch it over to kind of the annual board meeting, which will present the candidates for board members. And then after that, are you going to present information like this to parents?
Well, I guess that'll be a question. Do we feel like this is steady enough? I don't know that I'd feel like we could make this consumable for our community in less than a week, but do you guys feel like we're there?
I think maybe discussing it in more generalized terms
Right.
and saying, you know, be on the lookout for more stuff, feed them a little bit so that they,
Right.
you know, that everybody knows we're
Look for
doing
it.
it,
Okay.
but don't
No, I
promise
agree.
too much at this
Right.
point.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about is I don't want to promise things that we don't know that we can actually do yet.
Yeah, so I think if we keep it to high level, let them know we're working on it, welcome comments, input,
Right.
you know, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then go forward and see if there's comments or whatever.
And I think their biggest question is going to be when is this
Right.
going to open? Like, I don't think they really care whether we have a culinary thing. I think they want to know when this is going to open.
Right.
That's
And I
my
think if we give
anecdotal.
that overview,
Yeah.
Right.
it'll show that
And-
we're doing what we said, we're moving forward, and there's a real concrete plan for it. And then when we tell them, you know, start looking for hammers and things to be wielded over at the middle school, that'll, you know, that campus, that'll help too.
Well, I think this would be a unique opportunity. The updates that are going to happen to the main campus, we need to share that with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this would be a good time to do that.
That was my question about, I know in the past we've had kind of like a, just a annual report kind of, you know, here's what's
Yeah.
been accomplished. Here's, you know, not from a school level, but from a governance perspective, what have we as a board been doing over this time? And I think we owe that to the parents as well, especially when they're electing people.
I thought that was I just thought that was assumed as part of the plan.
Oh, I didn't know if there was an agenda or something. I don't know. So
Not yet.
Okay.
We're talking a week away. Come on.
Got plenty of time.
Jesus.
Okay.
Time.
So the thing I'm interested in is we're not going to go into major detail about these pieces aside from we are working our way through it. We're making good progress. Be on the lookout for, you know, cool information as we get to something more concrete that we could share.
Mhm.
But no promises yet. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well then, Mr. Bryan, I can follow up with you. Maybe we can talk about some next steps for the agenda for the next working session. We can bring that back down to the smaller group, and then just do updates in the general meeting, you know, going forward again, if that sounds fair to everyone.
Sounds good.
Thank you all so much for your time. And
Thanks for all the work, everyone.
yeah, we'll
Thanks, board. Appreciate the support, the vision.
thank you, everyone.
All right,
We're
bye.
good. All right.